Welcome to News Breakdown. So it's been a while since I've put out some content on this particular channel. However, I found myself with a little bit of downtime and I've had multiple ideas for this particular channel. So we will get this up and running again. The videos will also be available in podcast form. If you are listening onto the podcast, please make your way over to the YouTube channel, which there will be some additional content that you can find on the YouTube channel. So in today's video or in today's episode, we will be talking about the COVID-19 situation and what we know so far in terms of what's happened, where did it start, and what's actually going to happen, and what kind of actions government around the world are actually taking in terms of actually trying to quash this deadly virus. So what do we know so far about COVID-19? So far we know 400,000 cases at the time of recording this episode have been reported around the world. The virus itself broke out in China, in the city of Wuhan, and reports suggest that the virus emerged from a wet market in China. So if you're familiar with Chinese culture, to some extent, Chinese people tend to eat wild game meat. So that includes bats or any animals that you can find within the wild. Of course, they do farm animals that we do consider as pets, such as dogs, so you will find dog farms in China as well. However, reports suggest that the virus broke out in the city of Wuhan from an individual who consumed bat meat, and that cross-contamination came from the bat itself, and the virus obviously jumped from the host bat to the human, and that's how the virus itself broke out as far as we understand to date. So to date, it's obviously killed over 20,000 people around the world. Two of the worst affected countries around the world are China, of course, as you may expect. However, cases over there are being reported to be on the decline. I may beg to differ. Of course, China is the warehouse of the world in the nicest terms, and the reason for that, I do say that the numbers may be slightly being skewed, is purely because that China wants to get back to business. They want to get their economy going again. The economy has stagnated for a number of months now, and they want to get back to business. So I do believe that there may be false reporting. We've seen the images of the doctors that were removing their masks, the nurses celebrating the end of the coronavirus. Of course, it's not the end. They're still taking precautions. However, people are still under lockdown, but people are gradually being let out, and that's in China. And the second worst affected country is Italy. Of course, we can also include Spain within this list. Over 4,000 people have now died in Spain. However, Italy has also got 4,000 plus deaths from this particular virus. So of course, they are dealing with a very, very bad situation as we speak at the time of recording this video. There are reports of elderly people being turned away, medical staff finding themselves in a situation where they have to choose who they're going to save and who is going to die, and it's a horrific situation that these people find themselves in. Over 100,000 people have recovered from the virus though around the world, so that is a positive. Of course, a vaccine is still under development. Nothing has been developed as yet. However, there are talks of malaria medication being able to be adapted to actually deal with this particular virus in a human body. However, we know these things generally take a very, very long time to test and develop a vaccination. It takes roughly about 12 months to get that approved and fully tested so that everyone's safe, anyone that will be using that particular vaccine. So that's something that we will certainly stay on top of. We might make a separate episode in relation to the progress of the development of a vaccine for the coronavirus. So what actions are governments around the world taking? So of course, this has become a worldwide situation, and a lot of governments are reacting in the same way. Governments around the world have implemented rules that may have never been seen in generations, maybe going back to the Second World War. Some of the restrictions that have been put in place around the world include people being in lockdown completely and not being allowed to leave their homes unless you are a key worker, which would be in some countries a nurse, a doctor, or anyone working in a medical capacity. Of course, police officers and people like that. Some restrictions, of course, also involve food, which we will touch on later on in the episode. So some of the large cities around the world that are currently under lockdown include London, New York, California. Wuhan itself, of course, which is a city of roughly around 12, 13 million people, if I am not wrong. The most of Italy, really the whole country is under lockdown. Spain, the majority of Spain, major cities in India. Images emerged yesterday showing Indian police absolutely battering people who actually had gathered in a huge gathering, and people weren't obviously obeying the rules or taking the whole situation serious. So they've obviously opted to batter these people, to obviously disperse them, to get them to stay indoors. A lot of people around the world are obviously not taking this whole situation serious, but it is of course a very serious situation. So those are some of the major cities around the world that are obviously on lockdown, and many more. Governments are now rationing certain food items for citizens. So in the UK, certain food items, you can't purchase more than 2 or 3 items of that one particular food item. Of course, we have seen some food shortages. Of course, the government has been reassuring people. The individuals that are in charge of the major supermarkets in the UK also have been reassuring people in terms of the amount of food that is still available within the stocks. However, that hasn't stopped people from panic buying, as well as the bizarre scenario of buying a lot of toilet roll. I'm obviously guilty of that myself. However, I've never understood it. Of course, the explanation that I was told, or the explanation that I came across, was in relation to the fact that if you wipe your hands with toilet roll, the virus, if you do have the virus in your hands, it will just go down the toilet with the toilet roll itself. However, if you're using a towel and continuously reusing that towel, it is a breeding ground for the virus itself. So people have gone out and panicked by toilet roll. I've been to multiple supermarkets over the last couple of weeks with no joy whatsoever in terms of getting toilet roll, apart from what I had in my reserves. So in some parts of the world, Italy in particular, police have actually started being deployed onto the streets in order to hand out fines to citizens that are seen to be breaking the curfew in place. Of course, some of the fines that we have seen actually are resulting to about €30,000 fines, or 3 years in prison. Of course, if you don't have the actual adequate permit to be out and about, which is a system that Italy has deployed, where citizens are having to go online, print out a form, and enlist a reason why they need to leave their house, and permission will be granted. You will get a response. You print out that particular form and you ride around with that particular form to show that you are eligible to be outside. So this, to me, this whole situation seems as if we are heading towards darker times. Of course, this is a developing situation, so we will certainly have to wait and see how it obviously pans out in terms of actually having to obtain a permit to go outside. However, the UK government has advised people to, of course, stay at home. However, you are permitted to actually undertake an hour exercise outside, so that could be at a park, which they haven't closed. But a lot of people have been taking this situation as a vacation. So governments are having to provide financial aid as well to the self-employed, people that have been laid off by their companies due to the disruption that this virus has caused, and pumping money into their respective economies. We know the UK government has actually announced a bailout fund of roughly around £350 billion, and that will be used to obviously fund the NHS, which is the healthcare system over here in the UK, to buy new equipment, to get retired doctors and nurses to come back to work. Of course, that will allow that fund will allow the NHS to pay for those individuals, as well as the fact that that money will be used to actually cover the wages of self-employed people in order just to save the economy from imploding. There'll be tons and tons of people that would have been laid off as well, and that money will be used to obviously supplement their wages. The government also announced in the UK in particular that 80% of a worker's wages will be covered by the government, which means a lot of companies can certainly avoid laying people off. They will certainly need to cover at least that 20%, or the actual 20% will be covered by the welfare system that's in place in the UK. Businesses that are not considered to be essential have been ordered to close as well. So you look at stores such as electrical stores, clothing shops, coffee shops, cafes, or anything of that nature, something that's not considered to be essential has been ordered to close by the UK government. The UK government has also managed to enlist a total of 450,000 volunteers to help with a manner of activities around the country in relation to the coronavirus. So a lot of logistics will need to be undertaken in regards to this. It may be down to delivering food, delivering medication, anything along that nature. 450,000 people have signed up to be volunteers, and I certainly do commend those people that have done so. They're going out on a limb to obviously risk themselves in order to better the country as a whole. So of course, congratulations to those people, and I'd certainly wish them all the best. Of course, we have seen a number of governments around the world building new hospitals, again referring back to the UK. The Excel Centre, which is a massive conference centre that is based in London, will be converted into a 4,000 bed hospital by the army. So the army is currently undertaking that particular task now. That should be ready in the next week or so, but we will certainly bring you an update in relation to that as well. Our government's going to impose stricter rules, so we don't know how this is going to end. Of course, some strict rules are currently in place. We are being told that in terms of people being outside without a good enough reason, this will be embedded into the law, which will give the police and any other authority much better powers in terms of actually enforcing this particular rule, just to stem the spread of the virus itself. However, do we know if things are going to get better or worse? We don't know at the time of recording this video, but my gut instinct tells me that stricter restrictions will be placed on citizens, and everyday life as we know it for a very long time will not revert back to normal. So how has this affected regular life for citizens? So we've obviously touched upon this to the lead up to this particular question, but people around the world are losing their jobs, which is obviously not great to see. People have families, mortgages and bills to pay, and this is something that we obviously weren't expecting, and this is something that's obviously not welcome in terms of actually trying to maintain normalcy for people. Children are off school, parents are having to homeschool their own children. It's an extremely complicated situation because you've got kids that were due to sit exams. They're not going to be sitting their exams anytime soon, or if they are, any preparation that they were undertaking to sit these exams would have actually gone out the window, and essentially it wouldn't be fair to ask these children to sit their exams in the actual original slotted time they were due to sit these exams in the summer. Self-employed people in particular have been affected by this. It's hit self-employed people very hard, and the reason I say it's hit self-employed people very hard is if you own a non-essential or a business that's classed as a non-essential business, then you have to close shop, which means you're not earning money, you're not putting food on your table, and you find yourself in a very difficult situation. And reports coming out of the UK suggest that 500,000 people in the last week have signed up to Universal Credit, which is the welfare funded system over here, and that is an unprecedented number of 500,000 people. That's absolutely incredible. I can't imagine the amount of pressure the system itself is under. So of course, again, self-employed people are definitely feeling brute force of this particular virus and the effects that it's actually bringing along. The stock markets have never seen a crash this big in the history of the markets around the world. Stock markets around the world have been crashing. They have been slightly bouncing back over the last couple of days due to the fact that China has opened shop again, but the markets crashed severely when this whole thing broke out, and some experts believe that we're heading towards a recession, if not a depression, and a depression is much worse than a recession. And the last Great Depression really was back in the early parts of the 20th century in the US in particular that was seen. Germany went through a very bad depression as well after the war, so it's something that some people that are still alive at the moment would have lived through, and I can't imagine difficulty in getting through a depression at this particular time. Moving on, the governments around the world have had to borrow money at an unprecedented level in an effort to try and rescue the economies around the world. Of course, we have touched upon that as well. A lot of focus has also gone towards the health workers around the world that are at most at risk. They're exposed to the virus on a daily basis due to the nature of work that they're doing. Of course, we know that we need these people. And of course, I do feel sorry for health workers purely because these are normal people as well. They have the same immune system yourself and myself will have in terms of being vulnerable to this particular virus. And to me, they are the biggest heroes that have emerged from this whole situation. Health workers have been playing a very, very key role in trying to save as many lives as possible. Of course, as mentioned earlier on in this episode, some health workers are having to make the tough decision of actually having to decide who lives and who dies. So of course, I do commend them. Well done to those people that are actually going out and risking their own lives, their families' lives, in order to save our lives. Another talking point really in relation to health workers in the UK was the fact that they're missing out on food items, as people have been panic buying, of course. So these people have to go to work. However, as mentioned as well, they need to maintain and live a normal life like yourself and myself. And by the time these people finish work, most food items have gone. So what the UK government has imposed, or what the supermarkets and the government in the UK have put in place, was to have shopping hours for key workers. So you have to prove that you work for the NHS and you are part of the list of people that are considered key workers. That will gain you access to the supermarkets before they're open to the general public, which will allow these individuals to get the basic goods that they need to obviously continue to survive and continue to do the great work that they're currently doing. So when is this going to end? Of course, we don't have an end in sight. Of course, no one really has a definitive end time frame for this. It has been mentioned that it could go on until the end of the year. If that's the case, people will certainly have to stay strong and obviously keep a positive mind in terms of the whole isolation situation. It's an extremely difficult situation that we have. I've got a young family myself and my kids are yearning and dying to go outside. Of course, this is extremely restricted. We're just going out for the one recommended daily exercise, but they don't understand why we can't go outside. And for this to go on for another few months, it's going to be extremely hard for everyone involved, of course. So what should you do as an individual or as a family if you're listening to this? So my main tips are what the government are basically saying. Stay inside, of course, and reduce contact with people outside your household when you do go out. Keep that 2-meter distance. Make sure you have enough food supplies indoors and go out when necessary. Make sure you also have enough supplies, in particular for children, so just a general pain relief medication, etc. Stay away from people that are considered to be vulnerable, so mainly older people, as well as people that have underlying health issues. Wash your hands and do sanitize your hands on a regular basis. And by all means, if you're not a key worker, please try avoiding using the public transport system. So of course, that's my take on the whole situation in relation to this whole virus. As mentioned, this is episode 1 of the podcast series that we will be kicking off. Of course, as mentioned as well at the top of the episode, I've had multiple ideas for this channel and this podcast itself. So we will be getting regular content out. However, at this time, we will be focusing on the whole coronavirus situation, and we'll try and bring you as much information as we can on a regular basis. But if you're listening to this podcast on whatever platform that you do listen to from, please make sure that you do subscribe for regular content. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do make sure that you do hit that subscribe button. So once again, thanks for watching News Breakdown.